Well, it's martini time. I caught myself looking in the camera. So, happy Monday. It's been a beautiful day here in Blackstone, the center of the world. I really had to laugh. Maybe I'm a little discombobulated because I just noticed that before I was getting ready for this talk, I didn't know what I was going to talk about. So my mind was going here and there, and I should talk about that. No, talk about this. No, it was Babylon. Babylon, I'm telling you. I was in there mixing my martini, getting lost in Babylon of my mind. Didn't even make the martini right. I put instead of putting the gin in the shaker, I just put it in the glass, in the martini glass, And then I had, wait a minute, I kind of like woke up. Have you ever noticed? I'm sure we have. We all notice that when when our mind gets into Babylon, jumping around like a monkey, that we might be doing something a ritual that we know how to do, when we find out I'm not doing it right. It's kind of like when you're doping off when you're driving, and suddenly I don't know where you are, And it's really easy to see how the mind can lift us up into a Babylon where you just kind of like, you lose your stability, you lose your point. So I was kind of experiencing that before this talk, as my mind was jumping around, trying to find something to stabilize it, finding some wellspring, some faucet to turn on that would flow out, some idea that would flow out, and I would try this, try that, try this, try that. It's called a worry mind or a fragmented mind, all of the Babylon mind. So anyway, it's very helpful to stabilize the mind when you hang on to something that is stable. So let's hang on to Jesus here. I love this cross because as growing up in a Protestant tradition, all the crosses look like that. But if you're a Catholic, it looks like that, you see. So I like that. So anyway, I named this, just wrote the title out. It's called The Blood of Jesus. Now, I've been reading, again, as I have mentioned, and because my talks during this last week have been on mythology, Shiva, Kuan Yin, and Jesus, and reading Joseph Campbell. And what really caught my attention, Joseph Campbell, a great mythologist, in a very simple, broad sweep, can really map out the ancient mythologies of the world, the cultures of the world that have given birth to us. So it helps me understand us when I can understand the great mythic motifs of the world that mix and churn up things in like a martini, the gin and the vermouth mix. So just taking this cross here, and let's see how far back we can go to understand the meaning of this. I know I have a lot of evangelical friends on Facebook, and one of the big things that pops, the blood of Jesus, the saving blood of Jesus. What does that mean? And so here we are having a martini, and I call myself the martini priest. Well, what does a priest do but serve, but I don't say serve, but he prepares the Eucharist. And what is the Eucharist but the drinking of the blood of Jesus? See? So when you participate in the Eucharist, it's a feast. You're eating this guy, and you're drinking his blood, and you're eating his flesh. He's been dismembered by the priest symbolically, and you eat it. Well, where does that come from? Was that just born with the Bible or something, or invented by the Catholic Church? Where did that come from? So here's where Campbell helps me understand that. So if you go back to the first mythologies or cultures were primitive hunting cultures, like North American Indians and the Europeans were hunting people. And they all had mythologies like Avatar. You watched that movie. Avatar was, the Navajo were a hunting people, and their mythology was hunting mythology, so they had a sacred relationship with the animals. You just killed what you needed, and you said a prayer, performed a ritual. And the hunting mythologies were that if you had, like the buffalo hunt, you had to do the buffalo dance before you did the buffalo hunt, because the proper ritual of the celebrating the bond of human and animal guaranteed that the animals would come back next spring, you see. Because the animals had to come back or you would die. So there was a sacred relationship in the coming and the going of the animals in the herds, you see, between the hunter and the hunted, you see. And that was the primitive mythology culture. But then you go down to the tropical climates, Sumeria, Mesopotamia, where where you grow things, where things grow all year long, and people begin to plant. And now you live in a vegetative culture, where you live on the crops. And you notice, and the people noticed that crops depend upon death. You know, if you look in the jungle, everything's dying and everything's growing out of the death. You put just that little Indian tale, you know, that the Indian trick that was taught to the pilgrims was you put a dead fish under the corn and it grows, you see. So life comes out of death. So the idea is that if you have that the rituals of the planting, and this is the goddess culture, Mother Earth, you see. These are not patriarchal cultures. These are goddess Mother Earth cultures of the dying and resurrection of the spring, of the seasons, of the life of the plants, you see. And so man had to participate ritually in this cycle so it would return. Because this was a way of getting in alignment with the cycle. I feel a sneeze, excuse me. Excuse me. Whoa. So the ritual participation in the cycles of life is what we're talking about. So the hunting people participated in the rituals that which activated their mythology, that orientated them in the world of depending upon animals. The primitive people lived in blood. They wore the animal skins. They were eating. They were killing. Life was death. Death was life. And then the planting societies, these great civilizations, city-states grew up, you see, with the planting. And their participation in the cycle of life was the dying and resurrected son of the goddess. See, so the goddess, the moon cycle, the moon's coming and going, you see. So you participated in that in order to bring the crops back, you see. So you get this motif of the dying and resurrected son. So there was a lot of bloody sacrifice in these goddess cultures. Aztecs kind of like took it to an extreme, where their sacrificial rites became blood feasts, you know. And the ancient kings of Sumeria and the ancient kings of these city-states were ritually sacrificed. The king was killed and the new king was born. So this whole idea, even in England, the king is dead, long live the king. Even in our country, president is dead, long live the president. He only lives for 4 to 8 years. The king only lives 4 to 8 years, then he dies, and a new one comes. The death and resurrection, you see. So this whole idea of the death and resurrection must be participated in. And eventually, over time, this human sacrifice and cannibalism, eating the sacrifice, you see, tearing the sacrificial animal or human apart and running home with it and eating it to give rebirth to the in alignment to you with your cosmos, with your mythology and with your people, with your tribe, you see. It's all realigning and staying in tune with, staying in alignment with your culture. So you dare not leave it or disagree with it, you see, because the whole world will collapse. So anyway, this becomes, instead of human sacrifice, it becomes symbolic sacrifice. And so the Catholic Church with Jesus just brought this right in, because that's what the Catholic Church did. It didn't exclude, it just incorporated all the religious and mythological motifs that existed and just brought it in, you see, and made it ours, you see. So here we have the sacrificial son of the goddess, Mary, you see. And so the blood becomes sacred. The idea in the ritual sacrifice of the dying and resurrected Son is that the blood is sacred and it pours into the earth to rejuvenate the earth, you see. So death rejuvenates the earth. Death rejuvenates life. This is the sacrifice. And ironically, you know, we can experience a taste of this in our society now. So what are the ritual sacrifices in our society? What are the what innocents are being slaughtered in our society? Well, school children. The slaughter of innocents and their blood, and wherever the drop of that innocent blood drops becomes a sacred place. People put flowers there. I think this is really interesting, because even if you drive down the highway, you'll see a cross with some flowers. I don't remember that in my past, but it seems to be new now. So if somebody dies, flowers grow. You mark the spot, flowers grow from the blood. Something's returned. So, you know, these are ancient mythological motifs here. The blood of the sacrifice feeds life and makes life return. And even with the Parkland shooters, Parkland students, you see, there was a huge ritual sacrifice of innocence. You see, just like this is a sacrifice of the innocent. So Jesus is innocent, you see, but he's sacrificed. So you have the students who are sacrificed. Their blood pours into the ground. And what has come out of it? But this powerful voice of saying, of life, speaking up, you see, of regenerating life in these students. They weren't passive. They didn't go to this Eucharist and passively just be victims, passively become victims. There was a refusal to be a victim here. There was a refusal to lie down and be a victim. A lot of people experience this when they get when a tragedy happens or something, like a shooting or something, and while the person is dead, but those who remain often get re-energized and become an active voice in change. Their lives are totally transformed by this transmutation of the blood into life. The transmutation of the blood of the death, of the grief, into life, you see. So, I mean, this is not old stuff. We're doing it all the time. The transmutation of death into life is a transmutation that happens within. And it's a total transmutation. So I think that would be what I would call the meaning of the blood of Jesus. It's not some abstract doctrine or something. It would be the actual transmutation of my life from loss to life. You see, death is loss. The dead don't lose anything. You're dead. It's the living that are experiencing death. It's the living that are experiencing loss and grief. So we either have a choice of becoming a victim of grief and just, oh no, I can't forget, oh, I want it to be different, oh no, and they just spend their life being a victim. And then there are those who are transmuted by the blood of Jesus, transmuted by the blood of the death of their loved one. And they're all innocent. I mean, everybody's innocent. And guilty too, but we'll get into that. But it's the idea of this, the death and the blood, you see. There's, in that death is the actual blood. I mean, you don't see it on the thing, but I mean, we're talking, symbolically here, but it's felt. So that living blood that flows into the earth from the death of the innocent, you see, transmutes into a new life. And people, TV is full of this, of people who are transformed into a new life through the death of a loved one, a death of a child, a death of a parent, you see, or something. Their life is transformed. So these old mythologies are still alive. They still have vitality. And we're acting them out now. Thanks for dropping in.